My story, I started off in broadcast journalism, went to school with dreams of becoming a television reporter and then anchor. And I did that. It was great. I came out of college and started in Missouri. I did the thing that many of us do, moved around all over. So met my husband in my first stop in Missouri. Then we moved to Arkansas together after we got married, and then Louisiana, and landed here in Indianapolis about 10 years ago. Along the way, we've had four children. And so they are right now 11, 9, 6, and 4. And I think that's really where my story as a doula started, was after I had my first son, Graham, and it was not an ideal birth experience. And I think that just was what sparked my passion for pregnancy, labor, delivery, advocacy in those environments. But that was 11 years ago. So it's taken quite a while to develop. I became pregnant really easily when my husband and I were ready to have children. And we were so grateful for that, of course. And I had a very healthy pregnancy. I was 26, so I was quite young these days, and I felt great, made it through the whole pregnancy, and got down to my actual due date. And here I am still pregnant, right? And especially here, we really think of that due date as a little bit more of like an expiration date instead of kind of just a guide of when baby might arrive. And so my doctor knew I wanted a vaginal birth. And my husband is about 6'8", I'm about 5'3". And she just kind of quickly convinced me that if I wanted to have the vaginal birth that I was working toward, that we needed to induce this baby before he got too big. And no one told me otherwise. And so I went in the next day ready to have a baby, and my body was just not on board. And so they tried all the things, Pitocin, epidural, and we went through that process. And after about 18 hours, which isn't that long in the labor world, like there could have been more time, but we had broken my water, and I was still not even at 2 centimeters at that point. And it was just very apparent that my body was not on board with this process. And I ended up in a C-section, which went well. My son is healthy. He was a healthy baby. I had no complications from the C-section, but I was emotionally very disappointed in the situation. And of course, you second guess yourself all over the place. But I was able to find a lot of solace in other people's stories, similar to me telling mine. I don't think anyone should feel any sort of shame or anything if you were like, hey, I had a C-section and that was great for me. Good. I'm glad that's how you feel about it. And I mean that, not sarcastically. But for me, my mom had C-sections. All three of us, I should say, were C-sections, because my brother was an actual emergent situation. So he flatlined and they had to flip my mom over. It was very dramatic. And this is back in 1980. And so she ended up with a vertical scar, which is much more challenging for a VBAC, especially 40 something years ago. And so she really never discussed any options. It was just, you've had a C-section and that's how you're going to have the rest of your babies. And so we always kind of had this thing that she could experience it with me, that I wanted her to be there and she would experience it with me. And here I am with my mom sitting there rolling back to the C-section. But I think maybe it was the journalist in me, but I just immediately turned to information for comfort and learning about what I went through and what my options are going forward. And I mean, we're talking, this is 2013, my son was born. And so VBACs were a part of the world already. And there were so many successful VBAC stories out there. So for me, I was just really excited, like, oh, I've kind of got one more chance, because if you end up with 2 C-sections, that can be really challenging. But I felt like I had one more chance, and I just armed myself with as much information and preparation and everything that I could. And I delivered Everett, my second son, vaginally, and then our next 2 children as well. And that was another big step. It was almost just as big of a step as the C-section in terms of where I am today. We're fortunate these days that a lot more providers are supportive of VBAC, and that's what we should be seeing because statistically we can see that it's a better outcome for the mother. So I'm a big one for evidence-based. That's what we're going for here, not just what any doctor or nurse wants to tell you. We're all flawed. And so I was fortunate. I found a incredible doctor at IU West out here in Hendricks County at the time who was not just tolerant of VBACs, which is a term I like to talk to my clients about. There's tolerant of VBACs, which means like we'll kind of let you do this as long as everything goes very well and according to our standards or comfort. And then there's VBAC supportive, and that's having a provider who is there with you appointment after appointment, making sure that we are on the best path possible to having a vaginal birth. Again, that doesn't mean it's going to happen, right? And I knew 100% that this might not happen. But I think for me, I felt better knowing I'm going to do everything I can to prepare. And then if this is the path we go down, it is. But I wasn't just going to kind of leave it up to chance. The level of knowledge I had going into the birth 1 compared to birth 2. And I very proudly say how ignorant I was going into that birth, because I don't want a single woman to feel any sort of shame for feeling like you know so little after you get pregnant, right? That's okay. But once I started looking at statistics and outcomes and kind of what interventions lead to other interventions, I just felt so much more prepared. I also was able to make decisions on the fly in that case. I think I almost prepared as my own doula, which is unfortunate. I could have used the help. I had a lot to learn. But one thing for Everett's birth, that VBAC that you hear a lot, is like epidural is the death of your VBAC dreams. Like you get an epidural, VBAC's off the table. You're definitely not going to get there. And that just isn't the truth for everyone. And I had doctors telling me, get an epidural, you need to relax, get an epidural, you need to relax. And I didn't trust them. I really felt like they were trying to lead me out of the VBAC until my doctor, who I had built that relationship with and truly knew that he wanted this outcome for me. Then I was like, okay. So that just speaks to how important it is to have relationships with our providers and be knowledgeable so that we can sit down and discuss and feel a little bit more like a team, a partnership, and not just like stupid patient and doctor. And I think I did get an epidural for Everett. And then I actually did have a birth without an epidural too. So I love that I've kind of had all of those different experiences when it comes to talking to women. Not that I think you have to experience everything in the world to be a good doula, but there is some relatability there to say, I did experience it this way, I did experience it that way, and this is how it felt for me. But really, as you know, all those experiences are very personal and different. So Pierce is my favorite birth. He's my third son. We didn't know if he was a boy or a girl. I woke up at like 11:30 in the morning thinking I just had to go to the bathroom, very pregnant, overdue. I like my babies well baked. And so that was at 11:30, and he was born right around 2 a.m. So it was very fast. There was no epidural. And he just came out. I'm telling you, like 45 minutes from 2 centimeters to 10. And I don't even know if I pushed twice. Like it was so crazy. And then I ended up having my daughter. She was an induction because they felt like that third birth was we were great. Pierce and I were great, but that isn't really an ideal situation for mom and baby to go through that process so quickly. Actually, we do want, mom's body to have time and baby to come down the birth canal and all of that. And so we decided to do a sort of gentle induction with the willingness to go further with Claire, my fourth, just so we could make sure we were in the hospital and safe for my personal situation. I did have a doula present for Claire, and she's a good friend of mine. And this was sort of as I was just thinking, like, what a dream it would be to work around births all the time. It was kind of how I was starting to feel around the time I had Claire. That was in 2020. And so she was present, and she took beautiful photos for us. That was the main reason I really wanted her there. I felt pretty empowered by birth for. I will say though that it's nice to have someone there just in case. I kind of knew she was there if I needed to bounce something off of her, if something went wrong. And so I did appreciate her being there. And then she's been one of my greatest supporters and mentors as I crossed into this line of work. I think it is just so important to remember that this is your experience. It is not your doctor's experience. And while our doctors and midwives are incredibly trained, I think they are there to only do good. I really don't think there are a lot of doctors just maliciously walking around. I don't think that. But just because your doctor recommends something, even just because the statistics say something, if your gut and your heart is telling you to do something else, that is fine. And if your doctor isn't cool with that, I'd say maybe you need a different doctor, because we want to have those discussions and those conversations. And a doctor's recommendation shouldn't just be the end.